So, welcome. This is the after lunch panel, so everybody is a bit sleepy, but hopefully we've all had some coffee and we're ready to restart our very rich and insightful discussion. My name is Ivan Quirst. I will be moderator and keynote speaker for this panel. I am a research fellow at the International Center for Defense and Security. It's an Estonian think tank in defense, security, and foreign policy. So I will be wearing two hats in this panel. I'm moderator and speaker. So first, I will address the role of moderator. We have a very rich and insightful panel, as we will see from very different perspectives. We will try to address a very ambitious topic, which is international security and South-South cooperation, so concerning also the developmental and economic agenda worldwide. These are two very ambitious topics, but we will address them from various different angles and hopefully lead to many insights, many takeaways, and many thoughts to continue. So before doing some housekeeping, I want to just say a few words about our panelists. I won't do the full introduction of each one. Their biographies are on the program, but I want to at least mention them so that you know who they are. So starting, Agmi Chana, entrepreneur and investor. Wenda Stefan, IR analyst and professor. Dr. Mario Pereira Garmendia, professor. Roslyn Ndisi-Obala, journalist. And Ambassador Lila Roldan Vasquez, former ambassador to Ukraine from Argentina. So just to do some housekeeping, each presenter will speak for about 5, 7, up to 10 minutes. We will have, depending on how time goes, we'll have either moderated discussion and a Q&A session, or at least a Q&A session. I noticed that we don't have any Ukrainian panelists, so I really want to have the Q&A discussion to bring in all perspectives represented today. So I will go back to my role as moderator, but I will now go to my role as keynote speaker. And instead of me awkwardly and doing sounds, I will just read, and hopefully that will be more eloquent than me speaking off the cuff. So the topic of the panel is a redefinition of the security and development orders of the world. This sounds like an ambitious topic for which there is no singular solution, but this panel will advance several different perspectives on these questions, offering takeaways, first-person perspectives, and concrete suggestions for moving forward. For my brief opening remarks, I will speak about what I understand by redefining the development and security orders and why there is a glaring need for this redefinition. As part of my research at the ICDS, I am sometimes asked, what message can we use to reach out to the so-called Global South regarding Russia's aggression against Ukraine? I always politely explain that dialogue and channels of conversation are essential, but ultimately there is no magic word, and even if there was, there is no singular Global South to listen to it. The reason why there is no magic word is because messaging can only accomplish so much. Persuasion has its limits, and those are the limits of the current development and security orders. This is not to say that communication is not important, but I will return to that point later. The 2020 so far have made evident the failure to create a world where there is freedom from want and freedom from fear. Development and security are needed to ensure these two freedoms. but both have been lacking during the different emergencies of the decade. On the side of development, these limits were made visible by the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Inequity in vaccine access made evident the enduring asymmetry between countries and the enduring gap between global South and global North. The pandemic was a shared crisis, but delays in funding and vaccine delivery for low and middle-income countries undermined their capacity to protect their populations in a timely manner. While support did arrive and vaccines did become available, the outcome was a longer pandemic for many countries with marked reversals in economic growth and human development. On the side of security, Russia's aggression against Ukraine renders painfully evident the shortcomings of collective security. The post-Cold War global security order failed to prevent Russia's war in 2014 and Russia's escalation in 2022. Today, it continues to fail to bring a decisive and just end to the war where the Ukrainian peace formula is fully and swiftly implemented. That is not to say that there has been no support for Ukraine. Ukraine has received massive help, to which Ukrainians have expressed their gratitude many times. Moreover, only a handful of regimes across the world have sided with the aggressor, with most votes at the UN Security Council denouncing Russia's war. But governments across the world consider that supporting Ukraine's war of self-defense is an option and not a duty. Support does arrive, but the uncertainty prolongs the war at the cost of human lives. Even worse, the United Nations appears disarmed when faced with an aggressive nuclear-armed power, permanent member of the Security Council. Change is needed. The limits to the development and security order result in two different injustices, but they both point to a similar challenge. The international order is falling short of creating a world where everyone lives in freedom from want and freedom from fear. Ukraine's valiant resistance against Russian imperialism is part of the fight against this injustice. Ukraine's path to a just peace and reconstruction has the potential of inspiring other countries in their fight against aggression. The cooperation among the countries of the Global South has been a trend in the past few decades, with the rise of South-South cooperation sparking hopes for a future of the developmental agenda. In the case of the COVID-19 pandemic, the role of large vaccine producers, such as India, and of multilateral mechanisms, such as COVAX, reinforce this hope. I will conclude by proposing a concrete, if modest, point for tackling these two injustices. Communication is essential. Now, earlier I said that messaging has its limits and that there is no magic word. But indeed, communication between Ukraine and the countries of the world is essential. In dialogue, disinformation can be countered, and a new consensus about development and security can be reached. Like Dr. Jan Casadolu mentioned, it is a way to shape an agenda by communicating. In this sense, I have a great deal of respect and appreciation to the conference organizers and to Ukrainian diplomacy in general for their efforts to reach out to new partners across the globe. Communication alone won't solve the problems of world inequality or of wars of aggression. But it is necessary for creating the partnerships needed to succeed over the challenges of the decade. So with these few words, what I wanted to accomplish is to say that there is indeed crisis in the world order, something that we've addressed in this conference from very different angles, from security to food security, from energy security to food security, to the legal order. and that there's a need for redefining these orders. In this panel, we'll tackle specifically security and development and how they match and overlap. And I think this conversation is very important that it happens between Ukraine and countries of, again, different regions of the world, Africa, Latin America, South and Southeast Asia. Because many of these countries have been outside of what Felix Mayadiaga mentioned, the club of powers that have defined international relations. So the fact that this conversation is happening between us and Ukraine is right now essential and has the opportunity to create a new consensus about our pressing issues of this decade. Now, I only mentioned vaccines, the pandemic, Russia's aggression against Ukraine, but we can add more global issues that can be addressed by this redefinition. On the top of my mind, climate change is there as well. So, thank you. Now, I will turn to our excellent panel. I will return to my role as moderator, and we'll first have Aimi Chana from the Indo-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, a new initiative, and I think we are all connected and forging a connection to Ukraine by being here, by discussing with you, and by reflecting and recognizing the many challenges that are connected to Ukraine and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I think Aimi has not only a great kind of work relating to Ukraine, but also a great personal story relating to Ukraine. So would you share us what you do and what is your connection to Ukraine?
Thank you, Dr. Ivan. My connection with Ukraine is spiritual. My personal hero is President Zelensky because he had the guts in face of, against all odds, he had the guts to say, I want weapons, not a right. And that changed history. If he would not have the defiance, the integrity, and the resilience, we would not all be sitting here and discussing Ukraine. And I share a history with Ukraine because of trauma. I was a businessman having garment export business for 20 years, 25 years, and visiting Europe almost four times a year. And in 2018, during a business visit, I had a carotid artery dissection, which I went into coma for 3 days. My carotid artery dissected, and I was in coma for 3 days. And post regaining consciousness, I was fully paralyzed on the right side of the body. Plus, I also lost my speech. So the doctor said there is no chance of recovery. He has to be on bed for lifetime. And my wife was told maybe 50% he can recover, don't expect too much. But by God's grace, I recovered almost, my speech came back in 6 to 12 months, taking a lot of speech therapy. And I was fully physically working in 2 years. And once I was okay, the COVID came and we had, COVID lockdown. And during the second lockdown, I was in Ukraine. That was the first country I visited alone in 2021 after my stroke. So I came to Ukraine to start up a business. I opened my company, and I was about to get a temporary residency and possibly a permanent residency. Then I went back to India, and by the time I got all the papers done, the war started. So the start of the war made me feel, that I've lost everything. That whatever I was planning to do, my whole life is fully lost because my chance is gone. But I was so inspired, by the resilience of Ukrainian nationals, everybody standing up to fight for their country, that I was going to Ukrainian embassy in Delhi, driving 1 hour 20 minutes one way every day to light candles in support of Ukraine. That is the least I could do. And that also, after 6 months, they stopped doing it, so I stopped going. So then in November, I proposed the at the time, current acting ambassador of Ukraine, Mr. Ivan Konovalov, that we should open a bilateral chamber of commerce. And he actually told me, you are the first person who has told us this. This idea should have come from us, not from you. So, and by God's grace, we went and started, made the chamber, and then we did a welcome event for welcoming the new ambassador, His Excellency Dr. Alexander Polishchuk, to India, and it was a hugely successful event with all embassies supporting us. So, from a businessman, I became a panelist. So I never expected this to be in such distinguished people who are professors, who are academicians, who are specialists in their own field. I'm just a businessman. So I do a business which I know best. So I will only talk in numbers. So I will talk in numbers, and I will give you all the numbers that we are looking to achieve. And I hope we achieve it very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Armi. So next, we have Brenda Stefan, professor in international relations at IPADE in Mexico City, if I'm not mistaken, yes? And you will share your opening remarks, and I want to kind of ask, I mentioned about communication, Armi mentioned about Chamber of Commerce and starting those dialogues with Ukraine. Do you think there's areas that can be specifically addressed, that where cooperation can be expanded and produce new results for facing the challenges that we have at the moment?
Hi, thank you, Ivan, for your question. I'm honored to be here today with my peer panelists. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Since the end of the World War II and the creation of the UN, the world has aspired to a rule-based system. Today, we find ourselves at a critical moment in global history in which the foundations of the international order of security and development are being unprecedentedly challenged. One would believe that the so-called Global South, for a lack of a better word, would have reasons to identify with the Ukrainian cause against the Russian aggression, which is clearly imperialistic and violates international law. Countries in our regions have less military power and therefore have a lot to lose if the new normal is the survival of the fittest. Then, why hasn't the Global South shown more solidarity with Ukraine? The first step towards promoting South solidarity with Ukraine is a correct understanding of the Russian aggression. As we all know, this is a multidimensional war, and as part of it, there is an ongoing information war. Social media algorithms facilitate the distribution of fake news. Therefore, non-regulatory initiatives such as fact-checking, enhanced media literacy, and news media codes of conduct can contribute to diminish disinformation. But in addition to the well-known Russian digital propaganda, to promote the support for Moscow worldwide, since the war in Ukraine began, Russian diplomats have multiplied their visits to countries which are not part of the West. In the 10 months of 2023 that have gone by, high-ranking officials from Russia have visited Angola, Burundi, Eritrea, Kenya, Mali, Mauritania, South Africa, and Mozambique. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, made a trip to Latin America, including stops in Brazil, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. Due to historical reasons, there is a long-standing anti-West sentiment in the Global South. Moscow is aware of it, and so it promotes the idea that this war is really a fight against Western power and neocolonialism. The Kremlin insists that the challenge to the current liberal order benefits the Southern Hemisphere, giving it more negotiating power on the international stage. Russia presents itself as an anti-colonial agent in Africa, emphasizing that it has never colonized an African country. On the contrary, it argues that Russia, as the core of the Soviet Union, supported various anti-colonial struggles in the region during the Cold War, such as in Angola and Mozambique. As if the Russian Federation defended the same values as the Soviet Union, Moscow uses the nostalgia for the Soviet times and the Soviet Union and the anti-American sentiment to connect with left-wing leaders in many countries, particularly in Latin America, where this type of leadership is blossoming. These strategies have won Moscow's own sympathies. As a proof of it, one can look at the recent Russian Federation attempt to become again part of the United Nations Human Rights Councils, where even in the face of blatant violations to human rights and international law, Moscow managed to collect 83 votes on October 10th. They were not enough to get the seat at the council, but think again of it. 83 countries think that Russia should be part of the UN Human Rights Council. Let that sink in. Ukraine's attempt to gain support in our region by arguing that it's fighting against imperialism, increasing its embassies in Africa, sharing President Zelensky's messages in different Latin American spaces of influence, and generally prioritizing the Southern Hemisphere in the foreign policy don't seem to have resonated in the same way as the Russian efforts have. Since it's been proven that fake news travel faster, it's not enough to try to debunk misinformation. We need to work on spreading accurate information, and we, meaning those of us who believe in freedom and democracy, need to rethink how to do it. In a humble manner, but trying to look for possible avenues to work on this issue, I want to put on the table some ideas as food for thought. We need not to underestimate the power of social connections at different levels. Diplomacy has to be enhanced with efforts in different social sectors. That is why this conference is so valuable. But Ukraine could gain more support from the Global South by strengthening its economic ties and generating business exchanges. The work of my colleague from India is one good example. Student foreign exchanges should also be prioritized because of the current situation in Ukraine. For the time being, the focus could be on sending Ukrainian students abroad, particularly to our regions. By mingling with other young people, they will help to get the Ukrainian message across. And we could do similar efforts with NGOs, women organizations, unions, youth organizations, academia, and the like. Also, when talking to our countries, instead of focusing its narrative against Russia, Ukraine could focus on the common experiences that it has with the Global South. Think of this. Recently, I had the opportunity to talk to the Latvian Assistant Secretary of Foreign Affairs. He told me about his experience traveling to Cuba. While the initial reaction of Cuban officials regarding the war in Ukraine was to argue that the United States was to blame for this war because of NATO expansion to the east, the Latvian official explained that it was the Eastern European countries that insisted in joining NATO and not NATO who chased them to become part of it. Then he went on to stress that Latvia was not going to accommodate to the Russian will just because it was a powerful country in the neighborhood. The Cuban officials then started to sympathize. I think this serves as an example of the sort of narrative that could connect Ukraine with the South. But there is also one important lesson that comes with this anecdote. It is not only the message that is important, but the messenger. Latvia, as any other country that suffered Russian occupation, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, is probably in a better position to be a messenger in Latin America than the United States, and in a better position to be a channel with Africa than any former colonial European country. And to go on with the same example, it's clear the Latvian diplomacy won't have the tentacles to reach out to all our countries, but I would suggest that in a case-by-case analysis, it could be established which Ukrainian bigger ally has the best reputation to help in pushing the Latvian, for example, diplomatic effort in a specific country. For instance, in Mexico, it could partner with France, Germany, or Italy to coordinate Latvian official visits with a robust agenda to convey the proper message. Furthermore, I would emphasize the importance of media personalities and social media influencers. These visits should include one or more meetings with a group of influent voices within the public opinion to have a bigger echo of the message that wants to be conveyed. Finally, I would underline the power of the Ukrainian diaspora. The Ukrainian consulates around the world could identify best practices to activate the diaspora in ways that would support the Ukrainian cause and its message. In Mexico, for instance, the Ukrainian community, completely independently of the Ukrainian embassy or the consulate, has set up a project that has made possible that 5 Ukrainian soldiers who had been injured in combat traveled to Mexico to get prostheses. This organization not only fundraises for the Ukrainian cause, but it also generates awareness and gets the Ukrainian message across. This is just one example, but I'm sure there are many others around the world that could be replicated. In the age of post-truth and fake news, the maxim, "the truth does not need to be defended," has proven to be wrong. Information ammunition is crucial. Not all of us carry a gun, but we all can fight by Ukraine's side by promoting a sound understanding of what's truly happening in this war. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianda. And thank you for this comprehensive analysis and the very concrete suggestions. So now I have the pleasure to introduce Mario Pereira, professor at the University of Navarra, professor in international criminal law and international security. So the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, working? Okay. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart to the organizers of this event for inviting me. It is an honor. It is a great pleasure to be here in Ukraine. And you people are really an inspiration to the whole world. Every single person that have a mind of its own and a heart should be in the right path of history, and the right path of history is in the Ukrainian side without any sort of hesitation. Now, I came from the River Plate in South America, and we have a problem. Unless you have a great skill in education, as the ambassadors, we talk too much. So I will try to focus on a PowerPoint, so in order to just go as fast as possible and to explain myself. So the first thing that I want to share with you is, well, what about the so-called New World Order? Oh, I can watch. Oh, this is marvelous. I have all these things deployed here, and then it's much easier. Bring that. So, is there really a New World Order? Look, I am a international criminal law professor. I'm not an expert in politics or in geostrategic studies. So I think it's important to focus on what I consider is the so-called world order, okay? So I think that you can understand what I'm trying to tell you, okay? First thing is that I don't think that we are focusing now, we are in a transition to a new world order. That is perhaps what Mr. Putin and his main assessors, like Dugin, Karaganov, and others, thought crazily that they were doing. But actually, it's impossible. Russia, not even Russia plus China, had the strength, the muscle to change the international system as it is, unless we allow that to happen. I think that the only way to allow that to happen is just to legitimize in some manner what they are doing here in Ukraine. For example, by accepting a sort of peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. I think that that would be, without any sort of doubt, a Grossian moment that will change forever the international system. And that is the major threat that the global south right now is facing, as well as Ukraine too. As I said before, what I mean by world order is the international law system. Okay, the international security parameters that more or less are shared by the international system, as well as to consider humanity as the object of protection, the referent object of international criminal law. Okay? Now, I know that some of you will probably thinking that it is infallible. No, it's not infallible. Like, no legal system is infallible. Actually, we have people that violate our national systems of law and international system every single day. The important here is the legitimate expectations that are protected by the rule of law. And as our very good friend from Armenia told us earlier, it is important the enforcement of the rule of the law. Okay? We have very good pieces of legislation. We need to focus on the way we enforce and the way we make that particular pieces of legislation accomplished. Now, when I say humanity as a referent object of international criminal law, basically I'm talking about humanity as construction, as considered by Comte. I mean, those recipients of some rights that belong to every single human being, just because they are human beings, that are not rights that are created by states, but they pre-exist states. So states cannot change it. Okay? And not a single institution in this world, doesn't matter if it is national, international, or regional, can change. Okay? So there is also a new obligation. I don't know if it is really new, but actually it is a new sort of interpreting the UN Charter, that is the responsibility to protect principle, that allow us to consider that every single state, in order to keep its own sovereignty and could oppose that sovereignty to the rest of the states in this world, they should at least protect its own population in a minimal standard. That is basically to protect from atrocity crimes. And this is an obligation, a duty of every single state towards its own population, as well as the different states of this world towards the population of another state that is crushing its own population, facilitating or perpetrating this atrocity crimes. Now, there is also, I think, I know that this is not necessarily shared by every scholar, but I'm one of those who think that there is a real red line in the international system in the aftermath of the Second World War, especially in the aftermath of the Nuremberg judgments. And that is that the war of aggression as a war of conquest is banned. Okay? This means that it is forbidden to, in some manner, crush another state with economical policies, with cultural policies, with even with the use of force. No. Fortunately, we haven't reached that point. But what is true is that there cannot be a recognition of any sort of sovereignty of a state that happens to obtain some land by the use of force in the aftermath of the Second World War. The problem is that if we allow this to happen here, we allow Russia to, in some manner, legitimate its status quo in the territories that are now occupying of Ukraine, then I'm afraid we are going to go back to the logic of prior to Brian Kellogg, prior to the League of Nations, and not to mention prior to our actual international system. Yeah, I'm going to go quickly. So what about the so-called Global South? Well, first of all, I have bad news for you. I don't think that we are in a position to lecture you anything, teach you anything. As a matter of fact, we must learn from you. I mean, Ukrainians. Okay? As I told you to some of you during the lunch, you are the ones who are doing the most sensical things. And the most sensical things I have heard during all these days of conferences are the speeches delivered by Ukrainian officials. I think that you are right in practically everything you're doing. And what we have to do, basically, is to help you, to aid you, to assist you as much as possible. Because we must remember all the time that this is not a war. This is a crime against peace. This is a crime of aggression, whose victims are not just the Ukrainians, but the whole humanity. And this is important to keep on remembering every time, because it looks like that the narrative that this is a war between Russia and Ukraine and Russia, allows some states to assume the position of a simple bystander. And that is not possible. It is not possible in accordance to the responsibility to protect principle, and it is not possible to, take into consideration the logic of international criminal law. I'm crazy. Okay, good. It's not me. It's not me. Now, I think that we also have to avoid what I call the Howard Finch trap, not Trump, sorry. This happens when you just do the PowerPoint late at night. Make these mistakes, I don't know. Now, trap. This particular scholar that I think he came from Yale University in the last edition of Foreign Policy, well, in some manner, maintained that it's important to use this particular situation of Ukraine in order to obtain as much as possible from the United States and the European Union. I mean, change your main policy, on economical things or in trading or whatever. And then, and only then, we are going to help you to help the Ukrainians. Well, I think that's completely wrong, because that is not understand what really is happening here. This is an aggression against the whole world. This is something that has to do with us directly. This is something that the Ukrainians are suffering in their own flesh and blood. But this is something that tomorrow will happen to us. Question is, who's going to be next in line after the Ukrainians? So I think this sort of policies are the most stupid thing you can possibly do. Now, I would like also to explain some, what I humbly consider some misperceptions about this particular situation. The first of all is this idea that the Western world do not have the right to help Ukraine. Well, I think they have absolute legitimation, the Western world, to give as much aid and help and support to Ukraine as possible. First of all, because it is a duty, not only for the Western world, but for the whole world. Second, because Ukraine, as it was remembered yesterday, was never an aggressor against any other nation. And doesn't matter what happened in the past. This particular case is about one nation that perpetrates a crime of peace against the nation of Ukraine, period. So how can you say that the Western world or the Eastern world or even aliens cannot help Ukraine if they want? Of course. And it is not a thing of wanting. It is a duty. It is an obligation. Secondly, and I will remember, even though some people are not very fond of this, but we Westerners happen to be humans too. And if this is a crime that has humanity as the referent object, then we have the right to protect ourselves. And if the way to protect ourselves is to give as much support to the Ukrainians as possible, then that's the right thing to do. And you can change the name of this subject. It could be Ukrainians, it could be Palestinians, it could be Israelis, it could be Mexicans, it could be Uruguayans. It is about the one who is suffering from an atrocity crime, period. And then, as I was saying, well, this is the duty of every nation in accordance to the second and especially the third pillar of the responsibility to protect. Then is it correct to say that some Western powers like United Kingdom, United States, European Union are helping aiding Ukraine? Or is it just the opposite? I think it's the opposite because, look, focus on the facts. This is an aggression against humanity. And Ukraine is the only nation fighting against this aggressor. Compare this case with the invasion of Kuwait, in which their own nationals couldn't achieve to protect their own nation. Ukrainians are fighting for their own existence. And in some way, they stop the invasion in the majority of its own territory. So in that occasion, the United Nations could manage, I mean, the Americans and Europeans could manage to create an international army using the flag of the United Nations, against a power that we consider in those times that have weapons of mass destruction, even nuclear capabilities. And we don't hesitate in those moments, basically because we have a different leadership in an international level. But the truth is that the response that we are giving the Ukrainians is not so big. And secondly, look, every nation must fight alongside Ukraine, giving as much support as possible. Otherwise, it will be violating its international duties. So actually, it's true that the United Kingdom, USA, and EU are indeed the states that help Ukraine the most, but they are protecting humanity not as much as Ukraine is. So because you do not support your helper, you only aid or abet it on a minor scale. So it is about time to say it clearly. We are not behaving correctly with Ukraine. We must do much more than we are actually doing. And the nations of the so-called Global South, well, they must not pretend to be mere bystanders. We have duties and obligations, not just with Ukraine, but with humanity, hence with ourselves. It is not a war, it is a crime. It is important to keep remembering this all the time. You don't try to reach an agreement with a criminal. You don't negotiate with a rapist you rape. How much you will tolerate or accept a rape against you. As much you don't reach an agreement with a thief about how much he may steal from you. That's ridiculous and offensive to say. Now, this crime perpetrated by Russia cannot be fixed or solved by a peace agreement. Once again, it is not a war, it is a crime. You fix crimes only with justice. You end the effects of crimes only with justice. Any other path is destined to fail and will only cause more damage and pain to humanity. Just think for a while what a return to the basis of the 19th century European imperialism could cause to peace and prosperity alongside the world. Ukraine and those states who support humanity against the atrocity crimes perpetrated by the Russian Federation and its allies are not fighting a war, but legitimately defending themselves. That means that there is no proportionality to follow, but socio-ethical restrictions made on international costume and use covenants norms, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the 1975 international covenants, the Nuremberg Principles, the Convention on Prevention and Prosecution of the Crime of Genocide, etc., etc. In some particular cases, these socio-ethical restrictions will allow less to the defendant to do. For example, the case of Gaza right now. But in case as the aggression of Russia against Ukraine, when you have armies fighting each other, what is allowed by the international law to Ukraine to do is much wider than in accordance to a proportionality that, by the way, scholarship in the last years, or decades, I may say, are considering this just from a numerical or quantitative matter. Okay? So I think it's important to consider this always. You are not fighting a war, you are defending yourselves. Now, finally, some ideas for actions. Well, first of all, I think that the Ibero-American states should introduce to the UN General Secretary a project of a statute of an international ad hoc tribunal for the war of aggression. I think that will help to get as much votes as possible in the General Assembly, rather than if it is an European project or an American project. Especially because Europe has a problem. Its own human rights charter do not allow crime, judges, condemned in absentia. And I think it's critical for this case to could manage to condemn Vladimir Putin or whoever leader of Russia in absentia. And international custom law allows it. If not, ask Martin Bormann. Liability criteria should be joint criminal enterprise. Forget about those theses of close vaccine that are not precisely the best ones. And then we must apply our internal law. Remember that international criminal law is based on national tribunals rather than international. Then the little fishes, in accordance to the terminology deployed by Murray Bernès, the one who created the joint criminal enterprise criteria and the whole structure of the Nuremberg trials, should be catched by every state that have the opportunity, especially those state members of the ICC. Now, apply your own legislation on war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, and if there is no personal or material connection, then deliver him or her to the ICC or to another state that does have jurisdiction, universal jurisdiction, for example, Ukraine or Spain, for example, say, to mention just one. Then all of that should be in accordance with the accountability scheme or guidelines developed by the Ukraine's General Prosecutor Office. A sort of remake of the Control Council Law number 10 in the aftermath of the Nuremberg jurisdiction. Now I will forget about this example and I go directly to this final idea. To create a common policy on the matter of confiscation of frozen assets from Russian political and military officials as well as oligarchs, we must define on a multilateral treaty, for example, the Organization of American States, I'm thinking about Latin America, could very well conduce that define the proceeds, the standards, and automatic forfeiture of restrained property and deliver that property directly to the state that is the victim, for example, Ukraine. Now, the standards could perfectly follow the same logic of the UN Security Council Resolution 1373, that is in order to define terrorist groups. Now, framing the cases in which every state could proceed to freeze or confiscate some assets and send them to a third state or an international organization. Such cases could be those in which for example, General Assembly or the Security Council indistinctively declares some particular action to be an international aggression, in accordance, for example, with Resolution 1373, and following a FST procedure, fast, simple, and especially transparent. And finally, well, some thought that I stole from Mr. Winston Churchill, and I try to apply it to you. Never in the March of Liberty and Freedom so many owe we so much to such a few. But in this case, what a glorious few. So you Ukrainians really are amazing. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you for bringing in a perspective from international law and for sort of connecting what Russia's war against Ukraine or Russia's aggression against Ukraine from an international perspective, but also bringing in the Ibero-American, Latin American angle, which I think connects back to the broader topic of the conference. So thank you for that. Now I have the pleasure to introduce Rosalind D.C. Obala, political editor at National Media Group. I think we have, I want to kind of mention again that we have a very eclectic panel with people with many different backgrounds, and we've heard kind of a perspective from emerging business connections between Ukraine and India, kind of a security cooperation agenda, international law perspective connecting Latin America and Ukraine. And what I want to ask you, Rosalind, is about how to continue with cooperation to bring a win-win agenda when looking also at topics like trade, commerce, the economic agenda that connects back to the development topic and the international agenda.
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to thank the organizers of this event because you've brought in a rich blend of stakeholders, people that cannot be left behind in this discussion about the Global South. And I think this is a platform where we can actually look at where to move forward. I think as we sit here, somebody will ask, why Africa? And why will you concentrate on having the invasion of Ukraine as a discussion with the African continent? And I'll take you home. Kenya is very many miles away from this nation. But the invasion in Ukraine has had a direct effect in Kenya. Just yesterday, we were discussing the cost of fuel in Kenya, and they just reviewed the cost of fuel, and for the first time, a liter of fuel is going for $20, which has never been the case since independence. So that can actually just tell you how we are actually feeling the pinch. Now, if you look at Kenya, Kenya is a country that actually recognized Ukraine as an independent state in 1993. And this is a country that has had cooperation with Russia since 1963. So these are two countries that are actually having direct effect in a country. That is the Horn of East Africa, not just Kenya, but the countries that are around the East Africa region in terms of trade, in terms of security. Now, when we come to the conversation of redefining the international security and development order, there can never be development without peace and security. So in that case, even as we talk about development, if we don't focus on the peace of a country or your neighbors, then there is nothing you are saying. Kenya finds itself in a very difficult slot, just in the continent, but also globally in terms of security. And it has just served as a non-permanent member in the United Security Council. Its term ended last year. And it has played a big role in the Horn of Africa in terms of security in Somalia, South Sudan, DRC currently in Northern Kivu. And that just tells you how important security is intertwined with development. And that brings the aspect of trade and bilateral enhancements. So in this case, I'll bring you back home again in terms of the trade volume between Ukraine and Kenya. Kenya imports wheat from Russia and Ukraine. Russia composes 67% of the wheat that we import to Kenya. Ukraine composed of 22% of the same wheat that we import. 11% is for the rest of the world. Last year, just after COVID, and after Ukraine changed their constitution in 2019, where they actually allowed Kenya to now import the farm inputs, the trade volume between Kenya and Ukraine increased. And for the first time, if you remember, since the other years, like 2017, going backwards, where the trade volume was at $7 million, it is now going to $200 million. But immediately after the invasion, then this has been affected, because what does Kenya import from Ukraine? We import wheat, there is oil, there is iron, there is steel, and actually if you come to Kenya now, the expressway, the steel was from Ukraine. So you find that when there is war in this part of the region, then it actually interferes with development, which actually builds on the economy of a country. Just last month, if you followed, there were demonstrations in Kenya. What were the demonstrations? It was about high cost of living. How does that trickle down to this war? One is the cost of fuel. That was actually the main agenda in Kenya's last year's election, when they were talking about how they were going to step in terms of the war and ensure that the cost of living has actually been addressed. That has not happened. So every time you see demonstrations in Kenya and the other regions, it's because of the invasion that is going on. So that's how security ties to development. When we say again that how do we now build on this, there are shocks to this war. One of them is the issue of how do we get fertilizer. Currently, fertilizer in Kenya goes for $50. In the past, before the war, it was at $25. So that is double the cost of fertilizer. And that is where it brings us back to the issue of food security. I don't think there is any country that can say they are food secure. But how do we ensure that that deficit is bridged with every country that needs it? You can only bridge it when there is peace and security to enhance development. Either transfer of skills, exports of inputs, and also imports of other things. For Kenya on its part, Kenya exports tea, coffee, cut flour to Ukraine. That is not happening anymore. The flour farmers are not able to receive the demand they used to get, because the transporters are not able to transport because of the sanctions that have been put for Russia. So even in terms of the SWIFT exchange rate, they are not able to do that. So that is how this war is actually impacting directly to Africa, and in that case, Kenya. Kenya is seen as the hub of East Africa. That one is around Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan, and DRC. All these countries, if Kenya is affected, because Kenya is actually the port of imports, then all these other countries are affected. That is how, when there is no security, that happens. Finally, both Ukraine and Russia do not have finalized cooperations in terms of trade, military engagements, education, because what has been happening in these countries is mutual respect and bilateral talks. In 2021, a delegation of Kenyan leaders came to Ukraine to do what is called audit bilateral. But since that time, because of the invasion, the report that they came back with has not been finalized by our government and ratified by our parliament as required in the Constitution. So that just tells you that the war here might be many kilometers away, but it is affecting development and inspiring the economy of the Horn of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind. Now, I turn to our final panelist, Ambassador Yoldan Vasquez. I want to highlight, we have here a different range of relationship with Ukraine and different experiences, but I think the ambassador has one of the richest one. Ambassador Yoldan Vasquez was ambassador from Argentina to Ukraine, as I mentioned at the start, from 2007 to 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And she is currently the Secretary General of the Argentinian Council of Foreign Affairs, or Foreign Policy. And it is my great pleasure to introduce you. And please share, we look forward to your comments.
Thank you, Ivan. I'm very, very grateful and very honored by this invitation to come here and have this intense exchange of experiences and knowledge with my colleagues in the panel and with all of you these days. And I'm also very happy to come back here because it's like a very familiar place to me. I love Ukraine very much. I've lived in this city, in this country, and I know Ukrainian people, and I know how alike they are to Argentinian people. We cherish the same values: family, friends, democracy, independence, liberty, human rights, as we share them with Europe. Ukraine is a European country, so we have the same values. Also, Argentina was the first Latin American country to recognize Ukrainian independence, not only once, but twice. Already in the first independence of Ukraine in 1921, which a period of independence that lasted, alas, a very short time, interrupted by Russia. And the second time in 1991, which was the definitive independence. Also, we have one of the biggest Ukrainian diasporas in the world. In Argentina, we have more than 400,000 Ukrainian people or direct descendants from Ukrainian families. And there are many also that have come back with their families during the Stalin era that encouraged people coming back to their respective countries in the Soviet Union and then stayed here and cherished their relations, their families with Argentina. So Argentina is not the only one to have many Ukrainian people in their constituencies. Brazil has also many Ukrainian people. So I think that Latin America is a fertile soil for Ukrainian cooperation. Going to the security, to the redefining the security world order, which is mandatory in this panel, I think that, and I'm not the only one to think that, of course, that the full-fledged aggression, invasion of Russia on February 22 disrupted absolutely, in an absolute way, the international order that we had known until that time. From 2 or 3 major powers that were sharing the commandment of the international security order, the States, the United States, China, surging also as a great power, the European Union and Russia less, because I think that it's Russia is a Potemkin power. We thought that it was a very big power, and we can see now that it's not so big and so powerful. And then maybe it opened the Pandora box. It opened the possibility of many, many countries feeling entitled to do the same, to conduct aggressive actions against their neighbors, against states that are weaker than, or they think are weaker than they are. And we are witnessing a surge of intensifying the use of military resources, fortifying military budgets. We've seen the NATO becoming larger, which was the opposite of what Putin wanted. In December 2021, President Putin of Russia sent 2 ultimatums to the United States and NATO in respective letters, asking them to engage themselves not to allow Ukraine into NATO ever, coming back to 1991 geographical borders of NATO and other security guarantees that Russia asked for itself. He was not heard, and on the opposite, NATO is enlarged today by the incorporation of Finland and maybe Sweden in the next future. And Ukraine is also very advanced in its negotiations with, of accession to NATO and to the European Union, where she's already a candidate. Another thing that Putin, I'm sure, was not looking for. This very, very traumatic world that we are watching now, we are seeing now, is a very dangerous one. If you just look at what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh a few weeks ago, if you look at what is happening in Gaza and Israel today, and we don't have to cease looking at what is happening in Ukraine, because news go very fast and they move from one big title to another, from one big news to another, with extreme velocity. And we should make sure that Ukraine does not disappear from the news, does not disappear from international attention, because people is dying everywhere, every day, here in a very long frontier between good and wrong. Another consequence of this invasion has been the strengthening of the West, as they had a very swift response to Russian invasion. They responded with sanctions, with military aid to Ukraine, humanitarian aid, technological aid. But the other side of the coin is that they become somehow isolated from the rest of what is wrongly, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, is wrongly called the Global South. Because the Global South is not so global, it's not homogeneous, it's very disparate. We have listened here to many examples of these differences. We are talking about regions here. We are talking about representatives from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia. We are not talking from representatives of the Global South. We represent our own countries. Each of us represent his or her country, not the Global South. And even if we can share common worries about security, about food security, about poverty, human rights abuses, and many other universal problems, each of these countries that are included in this big non-Western group of countries has its own national interests. And it's guided not only by these universal worries, but also by the needs and objectives and hopes of its own country. So the internet, that has also to do with the inefficiency of international organizations. United Nations is not functioning at all. They haven't been able to prevent, to stop, to resolve any conflict in the world for some decades now. Security Council is useless. There are 5 main members that have veto power, and they can do whatever they want. They won't get punished because they have the veto power, and there's always another major power that is going to go with them. And we have seen in this case, even if the General Assembly in the United Nations voted with a great majority against the invasion of Russia and asking to stop this invasion, this war, even in our region, the Organization of American States, OAS, has expelled Russia as a permanent observer from the organization and has condemned the invasion from the first day of the invasion. Not once, twice, or thrice. And it's very consistent in its resolutions condemning this invasion. But has it stopped Putin? Have they had any effect on the war? General Assembly resolutions, OAS resolutions, European Union decisions, whatever, you name it, it's not working. So I think that the only way to go forward is to trust in our neighbors, in the countries with similar interests. Regionalism is the word today. For me, is the solution to our problems. Not all of our problems, but many security questions could be answered by cooperation between our neighbors and people and states with similar interests. We in Latin America are a zone of peace. And we are also a zone of free of nuclear weapons. We have a treaty, Tlatelolco Treaty, because it was signed in Mexico, to which we are all obedient and members of it. Even if Argentina is a very developed nuclear country, we also use nuclear energy for energy purposes. we sell reactors, we are very developed, and we don't have a nuclear weapons production. Also, Brazil is in the same position, and we have an agency to control each other production of nuclear energy. It is the only one, it was the first one in the world. Brazil and Argentina in the 90s agreed to this mutual control of their nuclear capacities. So we have so many possibilities of cooperation because the Russian aggression not only disrupted the security and the food security conditions in the world, but it also gave us possibilities because it opened our eyes to dangers, to security failures and menaces, and it intensified relationships between some of our countries, and I think we have to go on like that, strengthening cooperation, South and South cooperation, to find solutions, for instance, to food security. Latin America is a great producer of food. We are main exporters of grain, of meat, and many other basic products for feeding humanity. And other countries are also good providers of other things. Technology is also on our side. We are developing technology very fast. So we can try and, from 8,000 million people that inhabit the world today, more than 7,200 million belong to a country who is in some regional organization. South Asia, East Asia, African organizations, Latin American organizations, European Union, NAFTA in North America. We all belong to countries that are already cooperating with neighbors or with countries that have similar interests. For instance, oil. Oil was one of the main resources that pulled countries together when they created OPEP. And even Russia and countries from the former Soviet Union have a CSTO, which is an agreement to mutual security in the region. That's why the Armenian colleague who was today morning in another panel was talking about Armenia's deception before Russia's aloofness when Azerbaijan attacked Nagorno-Karabakh, because they had an obligation through this structure to go for them. So I just wanted to leave two messages. One is that we have all the possibilities to cooperate. Ukraine is ready to cooperate with all the countries in the world, and I think that most of the countries of the world are ready to cooperate with Ukraine to stop this awful war and construct a new world order in peace, security, respect for the rule of law and human rights. And the second message is that we should all be Ukraine today. We should all be behind Ukraine and Ukrainians because they are defending with their blood and with their effort the independence, territorial integrity, and their future, which is the future of the world. That's my message. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ambassador Lila. Thank you again to all of our panelists. I am aware that time is coming to an end. However, I would like to invite our audience to think about a question that you would like to ask our panelists. And while you reflect, I want to actually also, I have a question of my own. I want to address it to Ayumi because it's a topic that connects precisely to opportunities in cooperation, in economic matters, and particularly on the topic of reconstruction, precisely in the subtitle of this panel. So, what opportunities do you see in this area? And that?
See, I will tell you first, there are three things. Firstly, demographics in Ukraine. The pre-war population of Ukraine was 42 million. Almost 9 million people have are refugees now in Europe. So, and plus the war, all the loss of people and all disabilities, and so that's why Ukraine will be short of construction workers. India is the biggest country which has the largest population, and we intend to help Ukraine reconstruct just like all the Middle East we constructed. So by supplying construction labor, engineers, and all the staff that will reconstruct the whole country. Europe can give all the capital, Europe can give the designs, but Europe doesn't have people. So now the only two countries which has a human capital is China and India. China, I don't think, because they are supporting Russia, Ukrainians will prefer them. But India is neutral, so, and they're preferred because they are people that are very easily assimilating into the home guest country. So possibly this is one area which we can cooperate. Secondly, we can give engineers, IT engineers, because that is one other sector which we are very advanced in IT engineering, IT workers. We have a huge number of workers. So that part, I think we can collaborate. And that's the whole point of having a chamber of commerce. We can help Indian companies set up business in Ukraine. Vice versa also, Ukrainian companies can set up business in India. And we can help both the countries. The pre-war business was between India and Ukraine was $3.75 billion, which obviously has fallen to much lower levels right now. We don't have the current figures. But I suppose post-war, within 1 or 2 years, we can reach the same level. And in approximately 5 years, we hope to double up the business. Thank you so much.
Thank you. While, yes, there's a question here if you would say who you are and...
Thank you for this panel discussion. It was very interesting for us. And my question is more, I think, about Latin American countries, but maybe not only for them. When we talk about international security and also about the United Nations, useless United Nations, yes, as we mentioned here, we have to mention about peace formula of Ukraine proposed by President Zelensky. And my question is, how do you think this idea of our peace formula can be adopted in Latin American countries or other countries of the Global South? What points of this plan may be interest to the countries of, for example, Latin America? And maybe Ukraine should propose something else to to promote this idea and to involve these countries to peace purpose and cooperation? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Is there any other questions? Maybe we can, yes, there's a question over here.
Thank you for a very exciting panel. Again, the question would refer to the change and reform of international security mechanism. And as Her Excellency very rightfully noted, UN is absolutely useless. It fails to deliver the very purpose for which it was built, enshrined in Article 1, to maintain international peace and security. And Ukraine is by far not the first time it has failed. It's more easy to identify the examples where UN has actually managed to do something than hundreds or maybe dozens of cases when it failed. My only question is, all Ukrainian lawyers with a lot of international support have been advocating and demanding for the reform of the absolutely unjust United Nations Security Council veto, which violates the fundamental principle of law that nobody can be a judge in its own cause. It's like the Roman maxim, it's been there for 2,000 years, and we still cannot enforce it in our principal international security organ. What are we missing here? How can we push for that change? Because we see that already France is agreeing, United Kingdom, and even the United States has said that it is open to reform, but it's still not happening. And the country which is perpetrating a genocidal aggression is put in charge of the international security. This is absolutely incomprehensible. Are we failed as a humanity if we cannot manage our own security?
Thank you. So there's two questions about the Ukraine peace formula, which has several agenda items that countries are invited to relate to specifically, and a question about the United Nations and collective security. Unless I'm missing that, whether these questions are addressed to a specific panelist, who would like to take them on? Yeah, Mario?
We try. I personally don't think that the United Nations is wrong. What I think is wrong is the way the actors are playing in the United Nations. I mean, the UN Charter and the rest of the pieces of legislation, international legislations, are enough in order to deter Russia, to stop Russia or whatever aggressor in the future. And look, it is not my point of view, it is a fact. We can see what happened in the world in 1991 with the invasion to Kuwait. So the question here is why it is so difficult in this case, because one of the two main architects of the international system is the one, the main heroine of one of the two main architects, the Soviet Union, is the one who is perpetrating this crime. That is why it's so difficult. But look, first of all, about the veto. You very well said, the first article of the UN Charter says clearly which is the main purpose of the organization. It is true that during the Cold War, we have this sort of conflict between the sovereign principle, and then the protection of human rights. Sometimes they say, look, I'm crushing the human rights of my people, but it's my own affair. It is not the case here, because it is a nation crushing the human rights of another nation. But even though it could be considered an internal affair, that is not. It's not what I'm saying. The fact is that we have new resolutions, we have new laws that help us to interpret in the correct manner the UN Charter. And the responsibility to protect principle is that it is basically an interpretation rule or principle. Look, it is about time for us to have the guts, I might say, to introduce a resolution in the Security Council, knowing that China or Russia will try to veto it, and send it directly to the International Court of Justice. And it is about time that the ICJ, who is the only legal interpreter of the UN Charter and the different main pieces of legislation of the international system, said clearly, look, you cannot use a tool, an extraordinary tool, whose existence depends on the Charter, because the veto power of the P5 depends on the Charter. And you cannot use an extraordinary tool given by one piece of legislation against the goal of that piece of legislation. I mean, it is acting against the fountain of legitimacy of that particular power that you have. And it is about time for the ICJ, who, by the way, it is an extraordinary court, to say it clearly. And it is about time for the rest of the states, like, for example, there were a lot of initiatives during the Syrian war against the use of veto power by Russia. And Australia, Canada, Argentina, Brazil, Spain, USA, there were a lot of initiatives saying, look, you cannot use P5 against, veto power against one particular resolution that has to do with atrocity crimes, because it goes against our own responsibility in accordance with the first, the second, and the third pillar of R2P. Now, it is about time to say it clearly. The problem is not the institution. The problem is the way we are using the institution. Okay? It is not a matter of the laws. It is about how we make the law work properly.
Yeah. Thank you, Mario. I'm sorry if I'm cutting you short. I just want to give Rosalind and the ambassador the chance to react also to these questions. Rosalind?
Yeah, maybe just to add on that, when it comes to the law, there is the ideal law and then the reality. In this case, what we've been having is where, for example, in Africa, the belief has always been ICC is a court for the African continent and not the rest of the world. And for the first time when they inducted Putin, then we thought that, yes, it can actually extend beyond. But going back home, Kenya has actually walked this path in 2013 when we had the president and the deputy president indicted alongside 4 others for crime against humanity in 2007, 2008. What happened? They went to the court and started shuttle diplomacy against the courts, so that African nations will actually walk out of the courts, rescind the Rome Statute, and go back and form our own courts back home. That has not worked, but most of the African countries have actually ratified this through their parliaments. So then it asks the question, because the general feeling is the big 5 who have the veto powers, at the end of the day, decide on how best the cases that are taken there influence their interests or not. So I think the conversation is, as the UN lived up to its bidding, because this was an organization that came up after the Second World War, and I think it is high time we have another conversation as the new world order. Do we still need to go continue with the UN? Or do we need to chart a new path and come up with a new organization that can actually look at the interests of all the countries in the world? Because for now, the conversation should be who is having the veto power, but the conversation should be, are we all equal partners for a win-win at any given time?
Thank you. Thank you, Rosalind. I see Mario, you want to mention, but I'm very sorry because time is we're already ahead of time, and I want to give the ambassador the last word.
Something, just
yeah,
briefly?
I want to give you the last word, yes.
When I said that the United Nations and the Security Council are useless, it's because in the pandemics, they didn't do anything. For the conflicts, they didn't do anything. They couldn't do anything. It's not that they didn't try. They didn't succeed. which is worse. Because I agree with my friend, Mario, that the United Nations Charter as it is, it's a very principled one. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. If it worked like it was conceived to work, it would be perfect. Because maybe it's a romantic vision that I have, but I've always dreamt when I was younger of a United Nations that would be just for everybody, because United Nations is exactly designed to do what you are asking for all the states to be equal in the international scene and to protect those states that are weaker or poorer, to put them on a condition of equal with the big powers. The thing is not what it is, the letter, but how it is applied, the letter of the charter. And maybe if, and there have been many initiatives to change this. There's even a movement that has been working for decades, that was an initiative, Italian initiative in the beginning, who is Uniting for Consensus, to which Argentina belongs from the very first day. And we've been trying to modify the proceedings of the Security Council without any success, I must say. Because the discussion is, many times has been, whether we expand the Security Council or whether we give veto power not only to the 5 that have it now, but some state from Africa, some state from Latin America, some state from Asia, and that's it. We're good. Instead of 5 veto powers, there will be 8 or 9 veto powers, and the situation will be worse because there will be more countries to veto Security Council resolutions according to their regional or specific interests. So maybe the solution is obviously to go to the International Court of Justice to interpret the letter of the Charter. But I think that we also have to stimulate civil society to go to their respective governments and demand that this is changed. Because the countries that can have a saying in this, which are the 5 big powers, are not going to do it for themselves, by themselves, because they are interested in keeping this power, every one of them. But if civil society unites, there's a movement of people demanding their governments to revise this question, to put hands to the cake and move it and transform it and make it better. Maybe we'll have a chance. So that's another item for cooperation between South countries and states.
Thank you so much. I was just informed that we have a few more minutes, so I want to give the word to Brenda, because she hasn't had the chance to speak beyond her opening remarks.
Oh, just very briefly to add on to what Ambassador Lila was saying, I think we cannot keep on with having like first-class UN members and second-class UN members. And the only way to change that, as it's been said, is raise public awareness. I think this is something we all think it's highly discussed because we all move in the same circle. But if you go beyond the scholars or people who are involved in international relations, pretty much no one knows about how the veto works. So in order to raise public awareness, we need to convey how does it work? How was it founded from the beginning? Because the fact that they hold the keys to any change makes it virtually impossible to change it, except for the legal interpretation. The procedure within the Security Council makes it virtually impossible. So the only way is to raise pressure towards the decision makers so that they feel that they need to take steps to change the situation.
Excellent. Yes, but would anyone like to comment on the question of the Ukrainian peace plan and
One thing that
okay,
I wanted to say that,
go ahead.
look, we have reached some creative forms to avoid the veto power in international criminal law, in particular in the jurisdiction of the ICC. The problem is with the crime of aggression, that it was particularly determined its jurisdiction in the Kampala Conference. But in the case of genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes, if some of the P5 decide to veto a resolution, for example, to send the case from the Security Council to the ICC, even if it is not a case of a member state of the ICC, they can perfectly do it, because if the Security Council cannot reach an agreement in 4 months, then the case automatically referral to the ICC. The problem is with the crime of aggression. Or, of course, there is another problem, that the whole P5 agree not to send it, but that is practically impossible from the political point of view. Okay? And that's everything I want to say, and I assume perfectly what you have said.
You wanted to react?
I think, in the words of Taras Shevchenko, faith is the light that guides us in dark times. And another quote about faith, which I love, is faith is believing what you don't see, and the result of the faith is seeing what you believe. So basically, Ukraine has to win, and that will change everything, because it will change all the world order. So Slava Ukraini.
Slava. I see there's a couple more questions, but at the same time is running out. So I think that might be a good point to finish this discussion. There's one more question, right? Okay, would you just please state it in about 1 minute if possible, and we'll have a 1 minute answer.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this discussion. Matro Shulga from Ukraine. Article 23 of the UN Charter, Security Council composition. Security Council shall consist of 15 members of the United Nations, the Republic of China, France, the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America, shall be the permanent members of the Security Council. No Russia at all. This is the UN Charter. How it was possible? No voting in the United Nations General Assembly at all happened. No. Russian Federation happened to be now permanent member without any voting, without application to become a member of United Nations. It's a basic violation of the United Nations Charter happening every day since December 1991. How it's possible to stop? Very simple. Ukraine's official position now is that it's illegitimate that Russia holds membership in the UN and permanent membership in the United Nations Security Council. We just need to raise this issue in the General Assembly. Ukraine, Argentina, Kenya, India, Mexico, Uruguay, any other small and medium-sized members who want to stop this impunity of so-called permanent member or usurper of the permanent membership in the Security Council can do it by voting, by raising this issue in the United Nations General Assembly. If there is a will of all interested parties, we can stop this and send very clear message to all those who want to stay impune from adhering to international law. I think that this is really the way how one of options to consider for all countries who really interested in maintaining international law as the basis for our live in such world. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you for your words, because I forgot to mention before when I was talking about the United Nations that in fact Russia shouldn't have this veto power, because the veto power belonged to the Union of Socialist Republics, and Russia arroged itself the right to inherit this power and this veto power. And my very good friend, Sergei Kislitsa, who is a Ukrainian permanent representative to the United Nations in New York, very clearly said so in one of the Security Council sessions last year, that he did not recognize the sitting of Russia as a permanent member of the Security Council, because it was not for Russia to take it or to inherit, because the URSS had disappeared. So this seat should have disappeared with the URSS. Or Ukraine could have inherited, or Kazakhstan, or Belarus, whatever. But that's another thing that it's strange in this case.
I would like to add, Your Excellency, even in India, Russia just took over the USSR embassy. They took over the USSR cultural center in the center of Delhi, and they are running everything as the whole thing. They just took it over. And the problem was, all the 14 republics at the time were so happy to get out of Russia, they didn't, they didn't do anything to counter it. This was the main problem. Now I think they are realizing that was a mistake.
So, thank you so much to everybody. We have reached the end. I just want to say a couple words to summarize the discussion. We've heard a variety of perspectives on redefining the international security order, also with the development and cooperation component. We've heard about the importance of communication, the importance of information, of exchange, of international law, international institutions. All these frame our discussions and the instruments we have to operate at the international level to hopefully, and this is what brought us together here, to bring justice for Ukraine. And I leave you with that. So thank you very much, everybody, and all of our guests. Let's give one more round of applause to our panelists.
Thank you so much for this great panel, and I would like to specify that this panel was tailored by Ivan, and thank you so much for that. You did a great job. Now we invite our guests, international guests, to the excursion to see the Kyiv, the city where we are. I have to disappoint Ukrainian participants. You are not invited. Sorry, guys. You can do excursion on your own, probably. So please, not to spend the time, please grab your umbrellas because it's raining outside, and we're waiting for you in the lobby. Thank you so much again.